Hey everybody, Rob here at etrailer.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Curt power taillight converter wiring kit on our 2016 Volkswagen GTI. Now our Curt wiring is going to provide us with a 4-pole flat trailer connector, so we have all the required lights to get down the road safely, like our taillights, our turn signals, and our stoplights. Now it does come with a dust cover, which is nice to keep all that dirt and debris out of the connector. However, our wiring is meant to stay on the inside until we're ready to use it. You can see I have my wiring draped out the back of the hatch. And if we open it up, our wiring can easily store right underneath by our spare tire. Now I know a lot of people are worried about the wiring getting damaged, but you can see there's plenty of cushion on that weather stripping there. The wire's not going to get damaged even over time. So long as we stay away from the actual latch mechanism itself, it's perfectly fine to have the wire come down. And again, it helps protect it because it's going to be inside away from the elements when we're not using it. So we are going to have to get into the wiring behind our taillights here and tap into the circuits we need. However, because of the kind of wiring our Volkswagen has, we're only tapping into one factory wire. But after we get everything hooked up back here, we will need to run a power wire up to the battery so that our converter box on our wiring has power and we're not overloading our circuits. Now I know some customers may be a little bit nervous about cutting and splicing into their factory wiring, but it really isn't a complicated setup, and we'll make sure that we show you how and where to test everything. That way we can identify the proper wires that we need to tap into. In fact, let's go and walk through the installation together so you can know where those wires are located and which ones do what function. To begin our installation, we want to open up the rear hatch. We actually need to remove the floor coverings. So lift up, we can pull the floor coverings out and set them aside for right now. Next, we need to pull up the rear threshold here. So you kind of want to grab on the bottom, and we're going to lift up. There's just clips going around along the back side. And once you get a little bit of it up, we can start working our way across. And we'll set this panel aside as well. So if we move to the outer edge, right here in this corner, there's a recessed spot for this side panel. There's actually a torque screw holding in place. We'll grab a T25 Torx bit and we'll pull that screw out. Now there is one on the other side, so we'll pull that one out as well. Now if we move forward right where we have that cargo cover that usually sits right about here, we're going to have another screw right inside this tube. So again, we'll take our Torx bit and we'll pull that screw out. And again, there is one on the other side that we need to remove as well. So right at the bottom in this corner area, we can lift up on this plastic panel. Just kind of sits in this little cubby here. We want to get everything out of the way. And we want to start pulling this panel back. We don't need to completely remove it. We just want to pull this plastic piece back so we can pull the carpet back. So I like to start at the bottom, kind of work that panel loose. Again, there's just some clips on here, and this should be plenty of room so we can get back here, and we can remove these two push pins that are underneath that panel so we can pull the carpet back. Now, a trim panel tool is probably the easiest to use, and you just get underneath the carpet, underneath the push pin, and just kind of start working it out until it pops out. And that'll allow us to peel the carpet back, and we can find the wiring that's going directly to our taillight. So I went ahead and removed the tape from the wires so we get a little bit better access to them. Now I'm going to take my circuit tester. Since we have a factory ground here, I'll hook it there. And I'm going to be back probing into the circuit so I don't have to damage the wires to test them. But I'm going to be looking for a signal. Currently I have my left turn signal on, but no other function. You don't want to have your taillights and your turn signals on. We want to isolate each signal when we test. So I'll come in from behind the connector. I'm going to be testing each one of these wires to see which one's giving me a signal. So we can see that the black wire with the red stripe on it is giving my left turn signal. I'm going to turn my turn signal off, and I'm going to test each one of these wires for the taillight function. Now you can see we're getting a signal, a very faint signal, on the same wire. So our taillight signal is still traveling through that black wire with the red stripe on it. Now I'm going to get an extra set of hands and have them press on the brake pedal and verify which one is our brake wire. So again, I'm getting the same 12-volt signal as my turn signal running along that same wire. So all of our functions are running along this black wire with the red stripe. Whether it's our tail, our stop, or our turn signal is all going along this wire. So we need to go ahead and pull the panel back on the passenger side, pull the carpet back, and we're going to verify the color of wire over there. Now on the passenger side, we got the same kind of readings. All the signals are running along one wire, except the color did change. On the passenger side, it's a black wire with a purple stripe. So at this point, we can grab our wiring harness. Now, in your directions, it's going to give you a few different ways to hook it up. But since we tested our Volkswagen, basically we figured out that it has a pulse width modulation with the stop, tail, and turn signals all on the same circuit. It's really not important what all that means, but basically it's just telling us how we need to hook up our wires. Because all of our signals run along one wire, on the driver's side, we want to take our yellow wire and hook it in to the black wire with the red stripe. So I'm going to use the quick splices that come in your kit. That way we don't have to cut any wires and really do too much modification to the factory wires. And we'll take our quick splice, and if we look at it, you can see there's two channels that run through there. We want to slide our wire in, and then we'll take our yellow wire, put it in the other channel, take a pair of pliers, squeeze it down, and then we can close the cover. Now on one end it does have a cap on it, so we want to put our yellow wire into that one so that the red and black wire can go all the way through. Once you have everything in place, kind of want to hold it with your hands so they don't fall out. And then we'll take a pair of pliers and squeeze that metal tab to where it pierces through both of the wires. I like to give it a quick tug. And we just fold the wire over, or fold the cover over, so it closes in place. Now that's most of the connections we need to make over here. We're going to take our green wire. Now they do give you quite a bit of green wire because this is designed to route along the back edge, and we're going to connect our green wire to the same wire on the passenger side. But it did change color. If you remember, it's going to be the black wire with the purple stripe, and we're just going to use another one of those quick splice connectors to get that hooked up over there. Now back on the driver's side where our converter box is, we still have a few more wires coming out. We want to pay attention and bring our attention to the white wire that has a ring terminal on it for now. This is going to be our ground wire, and fortunately for us, we have a ground right inside the pocket here behind the taillights. So I'm going to take a 10mm socket, loosen up the nut, we can slide that ring terminal over and reinstall the nut. Just want to make sure you put all the other factory grounds back in place. Because it has this plastic retainer on it, I'm going to go ahead and pull it off. Make sure I get the ground wire on first so it's not going over that plastic retainer. And just tighten it back up. Now we have our red wire and our brown wire. Now these would be our brake signal and our taillight signal. But again, since we have the pulse width modulation system, these are not going to be used because all of our functions are running along that one wire. So I'm going to take a little bit of electrical tape. I'm going to cap these off. so they're not just loose wires exposed. And then I'll probably end up taping them to either the ground wire or the yellow wire, just again, so they're not hanging out behind these panels loosely. And just cap off the ends, make sure there's no exposed copper. I'm just going to bundle them up, put a little bit of tape along the ground wire here. Now in your instructions, they do tell you to ground these wires with the white wire. However, we have ran into a few issues. Sometimes that works, sometimes it causes some connection issues. So I'm just going to tape these up, but if we have any kind of connection issues, I can always pull these back out and either splice it into the ground wire or attach a ring terminal and put it directly to ground. But for now, this is what I'm going to do because, again, I don't think they need to be grounded. Just make sure that they're out of the way and they're not interfering with anything. So we should have one more wire left coming out of our converter box, and that's going to be the black wire. So I'm going to take one of the butt connectors from our kit, slide it over the stripped end, and crimp it in place. Now this needs to be ran up to the battery, so we can take the length of wire they give us in our kit. I'm going to strip back the end of it. We can put it into the other end of our butt connector and crimp it down. And this will give us plenty of length to run it up to the battery. Now there's a few different ways that we can get to the battery. We can run this along the inside of our GTI. Once we reach the firewall, we can drill a hole through the firewall and go out to the engine bay where the battery is. However, I would really rather run this on the outside of the car so I don't have to pull all those panels up. And fortunately for us, if you can pull this section back, if we come in just behind the taillight and we go directly down, you'll feel a plastic cover. It's actually a grommet that goes to the outside. So I'll go ahead and reach down here and grab it. Give me a plug right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut a slit in there. That way I can feed my wire down and then put it back in place so I don't have to worry about any kind of leaks. Just take a pair of my cutters and cut a notch right into the center. Then we can take the free end of our black wire and we can start routing it down that passage to the outside of our Volkswagen until we can reach it, and then we can pull all the slack underneath. So we'll come out here at the bottom by the muffler. I'm going to go ahead and grab it, start pulling the excess slack through until we can get all of it down and all this wire to the outside. I'm going to take my grommet. You can see I'm just going to slide the wire into the center there. That way it has some room and relief for the wire to go through. And then we'll just press the grommet back in place. It's a pretty tight fit down here, but I want to make sure that the grommet goes back in because, again, we don't want any kind of leaks, whether that be water or exhaust, coming into the inside. Now that we have our wires connected, we need to find a spot that we can mount our converter box. Now there is an eyelet at the top, so you can use a zip tie, you can use a self-tapping screw, however you want to secure it. But I'm going to use the double-sided foam that comes in our kit. So I'll take the backing off one side, stick it directly to the converter box. We'll remove the backing off the other side. Now we just need to find a flat spot that we can stick it to. And actually right behind this panel, this little cubby, you can actually put our converter box right against that panel. So that way the panel can still go back in place. It's not going to interfere with it, but it's nice and protected and it's not going to be moving around on us. Now at this point you may be very tempted to put all these panels back in place, and you can if you want. I always like to leave everything loose and accessible until I'm completely done, and that's the last thing I do. Because we do still need to run our power wire up to the battery and get it hooked up, and then test our 4-pole wiring. And it's a lot easier to do all that And if something is not working, we still have access to everything the way it is. So I'm going to go ahead and go underneath the car, route my wire up to my battery, and then I'll show you how I did it. A few things to keep in mind when you are routing is you want to stay away from any major heat sources like the exhaust or any moving components like the steering and suspension components. Everyone's going to do it a little bit differently, but those are the few major things you do want to watch out for and protect the wire as much as you can. So here's where my wire came out from inside. I actually took a good amount of silicone, sealed that grommet up, just to make sure, again, no exhaust fumes or water is going to get inside. And I started routing my wire towards the front, went ahead and zip tied it to this brace here just so it wouldn't get caught in the suspension, went over all the subframe and the rear axle, and then I actually routed my wire underneath this heat shield here. You can see that it came out right here by the emergency brake cable. And then I loosened up a few of these nuts using a 10mm socket so I could tuck the wire underneath this plastic panel, which definitely helps out because it'll hold it in place and keep it nice and protected. Then I have my wire come out right here, and you'll notice that I have a red airline tube coming down from the top. This is how we're going to get our wire up to the engine bay. I ran this airline tube down, and I did have to run it from the front here by the exhaust. I found a way to sneak it around so it's not right next to the exhaust pipe here. But you don't have to use a coat hanger. You don't have to use an airline tube. You can use a coat hanger, a string, just about whatever you have available to get from the top of the engine bay down, and use some electrical tape or, again, whatever you have to attach the wire to, and we'll go up top and pull it on up. Now, once you're starting to get all your wire up to the top, I suggest that you look underneath, make sure that all the excess slack is up, and then once you have it up, what I like to do is I'll take a zip tie and anchor it pretty close to the firewall. That way the excess wire won't drop back down, get caught in anything when we're driving down the road. So fortunately, our battery is right next to the brake reservoir on the driver's side. So you just take this panel, lift it up. Now, I do want to urge you to pay attention because the cables have these black covers on both sides, so you want to make sure you find the positive side of the cable, positive side of the battery. But we're going to estimate about how much wire we need. We don't need to actually reach the terminal because we want to put our fuse holder in place, but we'll come pretty close and we'll cut the excess off. We can grab our fuse holder out of our kit, and we're going to cut the loop in half, and we'll strip back two ends of our fuse holder as well as the one end on our black wire. We're going to grab another one of the butt connectors out of our kit, put one end onto our black wire, grip it in place. We'll take one end of our fuse holder, put it into the other end of the butt connector and crimp it down. Then we can grab the large ring terminal out of our kit, and that's going to go onto the other free end of our fuse holder. Slide it over the stripped end and crimp it down. At this point, I want to loosen up the nut that's on our positive post. So I'm going to take a 10mm socket and loosen it up. Now, most likely, it's not going to come off all the way. That's all right. There is a way that we can get our ring terminal around because it's not going to fit around the nut itself. But if we take our cutters and just take a small piece, we're going to cut that ring terminal to where it's a C shape. And then it'll give us room so we can slide it around the stud so it's behind the nut. Then we can tighten it back up. Finally, we can put our 15-amp fuse in place, and we can test our wiring, and if everything's working properly, we can clean up all the loose wires and put all the panels back in. So I went ahead and hooked up my 4-pole tester, and we're going to run through the lights and verify that they're all working properly. So I'm going to turn on my headlights. We can see that the taillight function is working, as well as the left turn signal, the right turn signal, our brakes, and the brakes with each one of the turn signals. Now that we know all the circuits are working properly, I'm going to take some time and clean up our installation and make sure all the panels go back in place properly. But once you get all your panels back in place, you want to make sure you route your 4-pole wire at least into the center by the spare tire, so whenever we're not using it, we can actually just store it down here and it's nice and out of the way. But again, I'm Rob here at etrailer.com, and that'll finish up your installation and your look at the Curt powered taillight converter kit on our 2016 Volkswagen GTI.